For 7,000 years, she had thought about this moment, what she would do, what she would become. If the One Ring ever came into her hands, in place of a Dark Lord you would have a queen, not dark but beautiful and terrible as the dawn. All shall love me and despair. And then she said no. This is the story of the longest redemption in Middle-earth, from a proud princess who defied the gods themselves, to the wise figure who passed the ultimate test. This is Galadriel, the last of the mighty. Let's begin with her names, because in Tolkien's world, names reveal character. She was born Artanis, meaning noble woman. Her father Finarfin's acknowledgement of her royal blood as a princess of the Noldor, but her mother Eärwen gave her a different name, Nerwen, meaning man-maiden. This wasn't some quaint nickname. Galadriel stood approximately 6 feet 4 inches tall, towering even among elves. Tolkien described her as having Amazon disposition, with exceptional strength of body and will. She bound up her hair like a crown when competing in athletic contests, and she was described as the tallest of all the women of the Eldar of whom tales tell. But the name that would define her was Galadriel, the Sindarin adaptation of Elatariel, meaning maiden crowned with radiant garland. And that radiance was no metaphor. Her hair was golden like her father's, and her Vanurin grandmother Indis, but touched with silver from her mother's Telerin heritage. Tolkien wrote that the light of the 2 trees, Laurelin and Telperion, had been snared in her tresses. This wasn't poetic license. Her hair actually seemed to capture and hold the light of Valinor's sacred trees, blending the gold of Laurelin and the silver of Telperion. And this hair would spark the creation of Middle-earth's most significant artifacts. Fëanor, the greatest craftsman of the Elves, creator of the Tengwar script, maker of the Palantiri, beheld Galadriel's hair with wonder and delight. 3 times he asked her for a tress of her hair. 3 times she refused. Why? Because even in her youth, Galadriel possessed a gift of insight into the minds of others, and in Fëanor, she perceived a darkness that she hated and feared, though she did not perceive that the shadow of the same evil had fallen upon the minds of all the Noldor. Many scholars believe this refusal gave Fëanor the idea of imprisoning the light of the trees, the thought that would take shape as the Silmarils. Think about that for a moment. The greatest works of craft in all of Arda, the jewels that would shape the destiny of 3 ages of Middle-earth, may have been inspired by Galadriel's refusal to share a lock of her hair. She saw the darkness in him, but she couldn't see it in herself, not yet. When Morgoth and Ungoliant destroyed the 2 trees and stole the Silmarils, Fëanor gave his famous speech calling the Noldor to abandon Valinor and pursue Morgoth to Middle-earth. And Galadriel, despite her distrust of Fëanor, was among the first to answer that call. The published Silmarillion tells us clearly, the words of Fëanor concerning Middle-earth kindled a desire in her heart, for she was eager to see the wide, unguarded lands, and to rule there a realm at her own will, without tutelage. She had dreams of far lands and dominions that might be her own to order as she would. This is crucial to understanding her journey. Young Galadriel wasn't just following her people, she was pursuing her own ambition. She wanted power, dominion, a realm to rule as she chose, free from the authority of the Valar. But when Fëanor and his sons committed the kinslaying at Alqualondë, attacking the Teleri to steal their ships, Galadriel fought fiercely against Fëanor, defending her kin, her mother's people. Even in her pride, she retained moral boundaries. She would rebel against the Valar, yes, but she would not murder for it. When Fëanor then betrayed the other Noldor by taking all the ships and leaving them stranded on Valinor's shore, Galadriel faced a choice: turn back or cross the Helcaraxa, the grinding ice of the north. She chose the ice. For untold months or even years, she led her people alongside her brother Finrod and Fingolfin's host through that frozen hell, where many of the Noldor perished miserably. And upon the Noldor who continued, Mandos laid his doom. They were banished from returning to Valinor, would find no peace in Middle-earth, would be betrayed by their own kin, and all their great works would ultimately come to nothing. Galadriel bore that doom with the rest. She had chosen her path. But something unexpected happened when Galadriel reached Middle-earth. Instead of immediately seeking her own realm, she spent years, perhaps centuries, in Doriath, the hidden kingdom of King Thingol and Queen Melian. And Melian changed everything. Melian was a Maya, an angelic being who had walked in Valinor before taking physical form in Middle-earth. She had created the Girdle of Melian, a magical barrier that protected Doriath from evil, and she recognized something in Galadriel worth cultivating. Galadriel became dear to Melian, and they spoke often to one another about Valinor. Though Galadriel would not tell Melian what had occurred after the death of the trees, perhaps from shame at the kinslaying, or perhaps because speaking of it was too painful. From Melian, Galadriel learned the deeper wisdom of preservation over domination, protection over conquest. She learned foresight, the arts of creating a shielded realm, mercy and patience. Many of the things that would later mark Lothlórien, the protected haven, the timeless quality, the sense of refuge from evil, were inspired by Galadriel's time in Doriath. It's also in Doriath that Galadriel met Celeborn, kin to King Thingol. Their love story would span over 7,000 years. But the First Age was not kind to Galadriel. She watched her brothers die one by one. Angrod and Aignor fell in the Dagor Bragolach. Finrod died saving Beren from werewolves in Sauron's dungeons, bursting his chains to kill a wolf bare-handed before being mortally wounded. By the end of the First Age, Galadriel had no surviving siblings in Middle-earth. The Second Age brought new challenges and new tests of Galadriel's wisdom. Around the year 750 of the Second Age, Galadriel and Celeborn dwelt in Eregion, near the great dwarf kingdom of Khazad-dûm. There, Celebrimbor, grandson of Fëanor, founded a brotherhood of elven smiths who desired to rival Fëanor's skill and fame. Then, around the year 1200, a being calling himself Annatar arrived. Lord of Gifts, he called himself, an emissary of the Valar, come to help the elves achieve greatness. Galadriel didn't trust him. The text tells us plainly, although Galadriel did not trust him and treated him with scorn, he was nonetheless accepted by Celebrimbor and the smiths of Eregion. Her wisdom, learned from Melian and honed by centuries of experience, allowed her to perceive the darkness others missed. But her warnings went unheeded, and Annatar, who was actually Sauron in disguise, taught the elven smiths the craft of making rings of power. Celebrimbor forged the 9 rings for men, the 7 rings for dwarves, and finally, without Sauron's direct involvement, the 3 rings for elves. The mightiest was Vilya, the ring of air, then Narya, the ring of fire, and finally Nenya, the ring of adamant, the ring of water and preservation. Around the year 1600, Sauron returned to Mordor and forged the One Ring, the Master Ring to control all the others. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. The moment Sauron put on the One Ring, every bearer of the rings of power felt it. They perceived the mind of Sauron and knew him, and they knew that he had bound them. When Celebrimbor realized Sauron's betrayal, he went to Lothlórien to seek Galadriel's counsel. Think about that moment. The proud smith who had ignored her warnings now came to her for wisdom. And Galadriel's advice showed how much she had grown from the ambitious princess who sought dominion. They were unwilling to destroy the rings, so Galadriel advised Celebrimbor to keep them hidden, unused, and dispersed far from Eregion. In the year 1693, Celebrimbor followed her counsel. He gave Nenya to Galadriel first, then sent Vilya and Narya to Gil-galad in Lindon for safekeeping. That same year, Sauron invaded. He destroyed Eregion, and Celebrimbor led a desperate last defense on the steps of the House of the Myrdain. He was captured and tortured to reveal where the rings were hidden. He revealed the locations of the 9 and 7 to end the torture. But he would not reveal where the 3 were hidden. He protected Galadriel and the other bearers with his silence, even unto death. While Eregion burned, Lothlórien remained protected by High Elf Galadriel. She may have already been wielding Nenya's power to shield her realm, while everything around her fell to darkness. This was the pattern of Galadriel's second age. Kingdoms rose and fell, friends died, evil threatened. But she endured, protected, preserved. Not through conquest, but through wisdom and the power of preservation. The Third Age found Galadriel continuing her patient vigil. For much of the early Third Age, she and Celeborn dwelt elsewhere, possibly in Rivendell or their own realms. But in the year 1980, catastrophe struck Moria. A Balrog was awakened in the deeps, Durin VI was slain, and the dwarves abandoned Khazad-dûm. King Amroth of Lothlórien was lost at sea, searching for his love Nimrodel, and Lothlórien was left without a ruler. In 1981, Galadriel and Celeborn returned to take up its rule. But here's something remarkable. They renounced the royal title of King and Queen, preferring to be known simply as the Lord and Lady of Lothlórien. Do you see the transformation? The young Galadriel, who desired a realm at her own will, had become someone who renounced even the title of Queen. 7,000 years of loss, wisdom, and service had changed her. Throughout the Third Age, Galadriel wielded Nenya, the ring of adamant, set with a white stone of mithril. Nenya's power was preservation and concealment from evil. The ring strengthened and beautified Lothlórien, creating a timeless haven where decay could not enter easily. But it also increased Galadriel's desire for the sea and return to the west, a poignant irony, keeping her in Middle-earth while making her long for the home she could not reach. In the year 2463, when the shadow of Dol Guldur began growing in Mirkwood, Galadriel formed the White Council to oppose it. She wanted Gandalf to be the leader, recognizing his wisdom and integrity. But Gandalf refused, and Saruman was chosen instead, a choice Saruman resented, because he knew Galadriel had preferred Gandalf. That resentment would fester for centuries, and in 2509, Galadriel suffered a loss that must have deepened her longing for Valinor. Her daughter Celebrian was captured by orcs and tormented. Though her sons rescued her and Elrond healed her wounds, the trauma was too great. The next year, Celebrian chose to sail west to Valinor. Galadriel remained, watching, protecting, waiting for a test she did not yet know would come. By the time the Fellowship arrived in Lothlórien in January of the year 3019, Galadriel was approximately 8,372 years old. She was one of the last remaining elves in Middle-earth who had witnessed the light of the two trees. All her brothers were dead. Most of her contemporaries had either perished or sailed west. She was, as the text calls her, the last of the mighty. The Fellowship came to her wounded and broken. Gandalf had fallen in Moria. Frodo bore a wound from a Morgul blade. They were pursued by Sauron's forces and uncertain of their path forward. Galadriel perceived their individual burdens with her gift of insight. She spoke to each according to their need, though what she said to most of them privately remains unknown. To the whole company she warned them to take utmost care in their decisions, reminding them that hope remains while the company is true. But to Frodo, she spoke a hard truth. You are a ring-bearer, Frodo. To bear a ring of power is to be alone. Even surrounded by friends, the ultimate burden was his and his alone. This was something Frodo needed to understand before the quest could continue. Before they departed, Galadriel gave each member a gift suited to their nature. To Aragorn, a sheath for his sword. To Sam, elvish rope and a box of earth from her garden, which he would use to restore the Shire. To Legolas, a bow of the Galadrim. To Boromir, a golden belt. But two gifts are most significant to our story. To Frodo, she gave a crystal phial. In this phial is caught the light of Eärendil's star, set amid the waters of my fountain. May it be a light to you in dark places, when all other lights go out. This phial, containing light that ultimately came from the Silmarils, which themselves held the light of the two trees, would save Frodo and Sam from Shelob in their darkest hour. And to Gimli the dwarf, who had asked only for a single strand of her hair as a token of their friendship, she gave 3 strands. Remember, she had refused Fëanor 3 times when he asked for her hair. Now she gave a dwarf, whose ancestors had ancient feuds with elves, triple what she had denied the greatest of the Noldorin smiths. She explained, "None have ever made to me a request so bold and yet so courteous." The difference? Gimli's heart was pure. Fëanor's held darkness. Galadriel had learned to value purity of heart over greatness of skill or status. And then came the moment that 7,000 years had been preparing her for. Frodo, burdened beyond bearing, and recognizing the immense power before him, offered Galadriel the One Ring. "I will give you the One Ring, if you ask for it. It is too great a matter for me." Galadriel admitted, "I do not deny that my heart has greatly desired to ask what you offer. For many long years I had pondered what I might do, should the great ring come into my hands, and behold, it was brought within my grasp." Think about what the ring offered her. Everything she had desired in her youth: power to rule all of Middle-earth, strength to defeat Sauron directly, a realm beyond her wildest dreams, fulfillment of every ambition that had led her into exile. And then Frodo witnessed something terrifying. In place of a dark lord, you would have a queen. Not dark, but beautiful and terrible as the dawn, treacherous as the seas, stronger than the foundations of the earth. All shall love me and despair. This wasn't deception. This was truth. With the One Ring, Galadriel would have become exactly this: a queen of terrible beauty who would dominate all wills, beloved and despaired of in equal measure. The ring amplifies what already exists, and Galadriel possessed the pride, strength, and ambition to become a rival to Sauron himself. All shall love me and despair. There's the horror. She would be loved, but that love would be compelled, enforced, hollow. And beneath it, all would despair at their loss of free will. And then, in the most crucial moment of her 8,000-year life, Galadriel refused. "I passed the test. I will diminish and go into the west and remain Galadriel. I will diminish." She knew the cost. Without the ring, and after its destruction, Nenya would lose its power. Lothlórien's preservation would end. The timeless golden wood would become subject to decay. Her work of 6,000 years would slowly fade. She chose diminishment, the end of her power, the fading of her realm, over domination. And remain Galadriel. This is the heart of it. She chose to remain herself, not to be transformed into a dark queen, not to be corrupted, not to become something terrible. She chose her identity over power, her integrity over domination, humility over pride. For Tolkien, a devout Catholic, this moment embodied the gospel principle: for whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Galadriel chose to lose her power, her realm, her dreams, and by losing them, she gained herself and her salvation. In that moment, the ban that had kept her from Valinor was lifted. Tolkien wrote explicitly, she was pardoned because of her resistance to the final and overwhelming temptation to take the ring for herself. The test was perfectly designed. She had to be offered freely what she most desired, so that the refusal would be genuine sacrifice. She had to refuse it in full knowledge of what she was rejecting, not in ignorance, but in wisdom. And after 7,000 years of learning humility through loss, after watching everything she built slowly fade, after growing from a proud princess to a humble protector, she was finally ready to pass. When the One Ring was destroyed on March 25th of the year 3021, The power of the three rings faded. Galadriel knew immediately what this meant. Lothlórien would diminish. The timeless golden wood would become subject to time, but she had chosen this. On September 29, 3021, Galadriel departed from the Grey Havens on the last riding of the Keepers of the Rings. With her went Elrond, bearer of Vilya, Gandalf, bearer of Narya, and the ring-bearers Frodo and Bilbo. The ship took the straight road, the path that leads beyond the circles of the world to Aman, the Blessed Realm. Galadriel was returning to the land she had left 8,000 years earlier. She would see her father, Finarfin, who had never left, her brother Finrod, reborn after his heroic death, her daughter Celebrian, who had preceded her, and the Valar themselves. But she was returning not as the proud princess who had left in rebellion, but as one who had learned humility through millennia of trial, loss, and finally, the ultimate test. She left behind Celeborn, who would follow later. She left Lothlórien to fade into memory. She left the mortal world entering its final age. But she also left a legend of wisdom and power, the healing of elf-dwarf relations through Gimli, and the light of Eärendil for those in dark places. And years later, it said that Gimli himself sailed west with Legolas, the only dwarf ever to enter the Undying Lands. A grace that Galadriel, being mighty among the Eldar, obtained for him. Even in Valinor, she continued to exercise mercy and achieve the impossible.
So what do we take from Galadriel's extraordinary journey? First, that redemption is possible, but it may take a very long time. Galadriel's transformation wasn't instant. It required millennia of experience, loss, and steady growth in wisdom. Some spiritual journeys are long, and that's okay. Second, that power refused is greater than power seized. Thoughtful. The young Galadriel who took the ring would have become a dark queen. Only the aged Galadriel who refused it could remain herself. True strength lies not in domination, but in the discipline to say no. Third, that humility must be learned, often through suffering. Galadriel learned to renounce titles, to counsel without commanding, to serve rather than rule. Each loss taught her something. Each death of someone she loved softened her pride a little more, until finally she was ready. And finally, that the test must be real. Galadriel couldn't just think about refusing power. She had to be offered it freely and refuse it genuinely. Only then did the refusal mean something. Only then was she redeemed. Tolkien was exploring profound questions through Galadriel's story. Can pride be overcome? Can someone guilty of rebellion be redeemed? What does genuine repentance look like after thousands of years? How does one move from self-will to acceptance of divine will? His answer: through Galadriel, through steady growth in wisdom, through protecting rather than dominating, through loving and losing, and finally, through a choice made in a single moment to reject everything you once desired. The Catholic framework is clear in Tolkien's letters. Grace perfects nature but requires cooperation. Galadriel had the opportunity to refuse the ring because of who she had become over millennia, but she still had to make the choice in that moment. Grace was offered. She had to accept it.
And so we see that even the mightiest must walk the longest road. 7,000 years from the shores of Valinor to a garden in Lothlórien, from a proud princess seeking dominion to a humble lady choosing diminishment, from "I will rule as I choose" to "I will remain Galadriel." The greatest power isn't found in domination, but in the strength to refuse domination when it's offered. The truest wisdom isn't knowing everything, but knowing what must be let go. And the deepest humility is choosing to diminish so that you can remain yourself. If you enjoyed this exploration of Galadriel's extraordinary journey, subscribe to Ranger of the Realms for more deep dives into Tolkien's legendarium. And let me know in the comments, what moment in Galadriel's long life do you think changed her the most? Until next time, may you have the wisdom to refuse what would corrupt you and the courage to diminish rather than dominate.